and followers, thank you very much for joining us today. I have a very special guest today, Ionut. He doesn't need too much introduction because you probably know him. He's a very active member in the Java community. He's an expert in performance, software architect at Raiffeisen Bank. And I have him here with us today to teach us more about how to improve the performance of our software applications. Ionut, thank you very much for joining us today. I'm very happy that you are here. He's a very active member in the Java community.
Thank you so much, Laurencio. It's a pleasure to be on your channel, and thank you for your nice introduction words. As you have said, yes, I work for Raiffeisen Bank International in Vienna, and yeah, I have a bit of experience. Back then, I graduated in 2007, the faculty, and then in 2009 the master. Everything was computer science based. I did a lot of programming. I started with the high school, yeah, and I really like it a lot, especially in the computer science department, because there I was really involved into the compilers, and this was something that really caught me. Yeah? So it was very, very interesting back then. Then I started my career as a software developer. I did choose the Java path. Even though I could have choose, for example, C or C++, I said, okay, let's choose Java, and I don't regret at all. Yeah? It's very nice, and I really enjoyed all of these years. And yes, my career was a continuous development and then continuous learning, and I really like it. So yeah, I did everything because I like it, and that motivates me a lot. And of course, yeah, you mentioned, thank you, your words were very nice. I also do from time to time conferences. I have a website where I publish articles mainly on Java performance and software architecture. These two topics are basically my sweet spot, my interest, to say. And I also do trainings, a very limited amount of numbers per year, but I do trainings on the Java performance and tuning. I have one, and that's the topic for today. We will discuss more about these things, but I also have one on the software architecture and so on and so forth. So if you are interested in, you can just browse my website. Yeah.
So meanwhile, I have shared your website into the live chat with our participants here. And friends, remember that you have a live chat there. So if you are watching this event live, you can ask questions in the live chat, and Ionut will hopefully answer them, or at least try to do that. So be interactive. And if you are not watching the event live, if you are watching the recorded session, you can still ask the questions in the comment section. So thank you very much. Yeah, you have Ionut's website in the live chat now. Ionut, tell us more about Java performance. Which are the main factors that impact the performance of a Java application?
Yeah, it's a really broad question. I'll try to cluster it in a few areas. Let's start from the beginning. Yeah? I see a lot of people really concerned about, for example, writing very or keen to write very optimal code, doing a lot of little, for example, tweaks. Don't use, for example, optional things like that. Yeah, I think and a lot of micro benchmarks. I also do a lot of micro benchmarks. But what I think it's important is the end-to-end application. Yeah, because this is what matters. And here the question is, what matters? You have asked me. I think it matters a lot of things. First of all, I would start from understanding understanding how the application behaves in a real environment. Yeah, and therefore, what is very important, you have to enable some continuous profiling for your application. And here, if you want to enable continuous profiling in your application, you have to understand that some profilers are limited, some profilers are better in some points, but there is no ideal profiler. Everything has pros and cons. I mean, each profiler has pros and cons. In my for my recommendation, so first of all, you have to understand how the application behaves on production. Yeah, there are at least one profiler which is a very great one. You can try it on your own. I'm using it a lot. It's called Async Profiler. You can also do this with Java File Recorder, and to enable this continuously recording on production for different various JVM events. It has some limitations, for example, but it's still good. Yeah. When I say it has some limitations, for example, that the wall clock profiler is a bit, not so good in comparison with the async profiler. That the CPU profiler is also, it doesn't include the native stack and so on and so forth, but still it's a very good profiler. It gives you a lot of information for free because it records everything. Yeah. Or you just go with async profiler and you do it. And then, so this is the first step. You have to understand how the things behaves on a real environment. And then you have to really isolate and focus on the low-hanging fruits, yeah, when you do this analysis. Getting back to your question, so let's suppose you do this. Yes, what I also forgot to mention is also I recommend in addition to enable the GC logs. Enabling the GC logs in a production environment, it's
But all the time, or only when I have to investigate a specific topic? What do you recommend here? So should I keep the GC logs
yeah, I would
enabled?
do so. Yeah, I would do so.
So
Yeah.
they don't impact the way
It
the app works
has,
too much.
yeah, it has a low. Of course, um, there is a penalty, but it's minimum. I would say
Okay.
it's one,
Interesting
two. Yeah.
advice. So I will note that down. So it's really good
Of
advice.
course, yes, of course, this matters which level of debugging, but I would say just start with the basic one. You don't need, for example, to enable a lot of GC events. Just do the basic one and understand, for example, take the logs and you can, there are a lot of free tools. Also here, some of them are not so good, but you can search and you can find some tools that it gives you, for example, what's the throughput, what is the latency, what was the maximum stop the word or the stop the word poses, and so on and so forth. So this I recommend it. It's very easy, and again, it's not of a bigger impact overall. Yeah.
So you do try to push as much observability as you can in the production. I
That's
understand. So
yeah, that's correct. I mean, enabling GFR or Java or sorry, async profiler plus the garbage collector, it's not something that you would suffer if your application has a bottleneck. Is definitely not because you enable these two on production system. Yeah. Also, you can, of course, you can do it for a period of time. I don't know, 1-2 weeks, and then you just let's suppose you don't want to do it continuously forever. Yeah, you do it for some time. You profile, you take it, you analyze, and you start improving it. But anyway, I would say let them enabled continuously. Yeah, they don't hurt. Yeah, unless you don't need them. But I I would doubt you don't need this. Yeah, to understand. Yeah. And of course, based on this, there are a lot of dimensions. For example, databases are a bottleneck in some cases. And then you have to understand, for example, is the connection pool good enough or bigger enough? if not, maybe try to adjust it. Are my queries? I mean, recently and on daily basis, we have issues because some of the SQL queries are not optimized. I'm basically in favor of writing SQL. The entire career, I rarely use an ORM. Yeah, so you might have.
That's a very it's a very nice topic. I'm really
You
interested
might
in.
have, you might be a bit puzzled, but I prefer to write everything
No, actually,
by hand.
I do think the same, and I will even have a live event in a couple of weeks about choosing the persistence layer in your Java application. So when to choose writing your SQL and when to choose Hibernate, for example.
Yes.
But before going into that, we already have a question from our followers here, and someone is asking you, Ionut. Will you have a new blog post about garbage collectors in JDK 21 on your blog?
Um, that's a good point. I have not thought about it, but I can tell you roughly what is the idea. So in JDK 21, there are a few GCs that you can choose. It's the serial one. Yeah, the serial one. It's serial stop the world, and the thing is, it's not used. I mean, it's the simplest one in implementation wise, but also, for example, the memory footprint because it doesn't consume a lot of resources. And it's used, for example, in serverless. If you use serverless, it's a good option for these short running applications where you just run them for a very specific period of time. They don't consume a lot of resources, but they do the job.
I also saw that that is the default for native compilation, natively compiled apps, no, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, this is the default one, but if you use, for example, Oracle GraalVM, you also have the choice to enable G1, which is not, I mean, it's a G1 based one. Correct. Yes. So getting back, so serial GC, you have parallel. If you have throughput, if your application it's throughput focused. Parallel GC, it's quite good for throughput. Then you have G1, which is the default one still today, since a few releases anyway, since a while, which has a mixture between latency and throughput. I mean, if you really need low latency stuff, this is not the garbage collector for you. And the thing is, if you have a lot of bigger objects allocation, they are called humongous allocations. This is not very good if you have G1, but in a nutshell, that you get a very good balance between throughput and latency with G1. And surprised me in a very good way. It's really amazing, the generation of ZGC, the newest one, because you asked me in JDK 21st. This you can choose generational ZGC, and this is a really good one. Of course, if you have a specific OpenJDK build, you can also check Shenandoah. This is also very interesting, and it's also a low latency collector. But you have just to, so the thing is, there are a lot of options. Maybe I'll at some point I thought to write some guidelines. Maybe I will do so if I find this interesting, because anyway, on the web, on the internet, there are a lot of information that you can cluster
That's a good point about the information you see on the internet. Say I'm a dummy and I want to learn more about garbage collectors. Where should I start from?
well, yeah, I tell you what I've did actually when I started learning, and I'm doing this continuously. First of all, I think a low-hanging fruit is, if you don't like too much of reading and going into details, a low-hanging fruit is start just Googling or going to a conferences and attend some talks, because usually in a talk, actually the people are trying to concentrate a lot of information they acquire during a lot of time. Yeah, so it's really a lot of experience and summary and focused information for that people. And usually there are people from Oracle, authors of these garbage collectors, that I highly recommend to look of those talks. Of course, there are gazillions of talks. Some of them are I don't say really bad, but some of them are better than the other. In general, try to watch and look for the people that worked and developed those garbage collectors or had at least some contribution, because they are the best ones. Yeah, and this is one side. So just try and search for this. Tutorials, conferences, videos. And then of course also these people, they have blog posts. Yeah, and you can just search for their names and you can find their blog post, and that's it. I usually, this is usually how I do. In addition, what I do, but this is actually optional. So beside of these talks, beside of watching some blog posts for the authors of this GC, or not really the GC guys, but also the compilers guys. You can also take the source code. I mean, OpenJDK, of course, it's not really it's difficult, but at some things you understand just by reading the OpenJDK source code, and this is also a good source of truth, because that one is the right. Yeah, reading the code, it's the best one. Of course, experience of OpenJDK source code, it's especially if you didn't work with C or C++, it's not very comfortable, but still it gives you everything you need, basically. Yeah, but this I would say if you really need to go into details. Yeah, and you didn't find it on the website. Yes, so this is what I would recommend. Yeah, look for people from these big companies that worked. It also gives you, if you do, for example, a framework. Yeah, if you like a framework and you want to understand. I mean, yeah, Spring, it's very well documented because it's meant to be very used. But if you talk about performance and something, yeah, just check for these blog posts, the people that worked
So,
with
Yunus,
with
to
the
change a bit
tools.
the subject, same, I'm a developer and I don't have an issue with my application, but I want from the very beginning to write it in a correct way, such that I have low chances to impact the performance in the future. What should I be attentive of? So you already mentioned observability and of course considering your logs and everything continuously. But when I'm writing the code, is it
Yes.
something I should consider?
Yes, I mean, thinking too much about how to write it in an optimal way might have a contrary effect or might end up in a very complex code. And the thing is, they are, at least how I see, yeah, they are. This is in our world is just the majority of us that we write business applications. We want to be faster on the market, and we want to provide a certain amount of quality. And there is a second category of people which are building the tools, like the OpenJDK developers, the framework developers, the library developers. For the second category, they have to understand that they really have to follow a lot of tweaks, even though tweaks are not very easy to understand for the first type of category of developers. But for this first one, which is the majority, I mean that the most of the people are just deploying business applications because they have to. I would say yes. There are some things. Usually, I can give you a few of examples. What I think it's when you write code, yeah. There are some things like, for example, if you use, let's have an example. If you use enums and then you say enums dot values, because for example, you have an incoming HTTP request, and that request sends you in the payload a string, and then that string gets converted into an enum, and then this is converted by looping through the enum values. And the thing is, every time if you call enum.values, this is allocates a lot of things. So if you have this kind of pattern in your application, you can immediately cache the enum values and use the cached version. This is one, it's very low hanging fruit. Yeah. If you, for example, do a lot of method with var args, especially if you call a var arg method in a hot loop or a loop which is continuously called with a high frequency, this also creates a lot of allocations. Yeah. What else? Try to, for example, avoid formatting strings in the purpose of just concatenating them. So for example, if you use string.format because you want to concatenate, for example, two strings in one, it's way more efficient to use the plus instead of string concatenation. What else? I usually try to replace, for example, if you use random generator numbers, do it with thread local. Yeah, random. It's much more efficient because the random stuff, if you every time you call next or you generate a pseudo number, there is a compare and swap operation, and of course this under contention, if you have multi-threaded, even without contention, it's lower. Yeah. Again, if you write files, if you read files, first of all, use streaming, buffered streaming APIs. Yeah. If you have bigger files, you can use memory mapped files. You can switch to asynchronous logging. I mean, most of the applications you don't need to the logger to be synchronous. You can just use the asynchronous appender. Also, logging, it's very dangerous because I read code and I see a lot of people just saying log dot and the hard-coded string. This is nonsense. I mean, you don't provide anything with that one because it will be duplicated gazillions of times. The same, for example, today I reach this entry point in the method and that's it. This is nonsense. Yeah, but if it is an asynchronous logger appender and it's called in a high with a high frequency, it's not very optimal. So I would say reduce logging as much as you can. Plus, yeah, try to use asynchronous logging. So these are quite some very low hanging fruits that you can just apply it on your application. Also, for example, misuse of data structures. For example, I just need an array, but I'm using a linked list because the memory layout it's very cumbersome with the linked list, especially if once you allocate a linked list, there is no guarantee of the locality. Yeah? So if you iterate through it and you request get and get and get, there is no guarantee that, for example, those will be co-located. Therefore, when you request them, they will fit within the same cache line or really closer to and closer. Yeah. Therefore, it might be beneficial to use very compact structure. This is the be careful with the data structures in a nutshell, without going further into this discussion. Yeah. So there are some things that you can, even without really caring about thinking about too much about premature optimization, that you can apply. You can apply for almost for free.
Cool, sounds really good. What do you think, by the way, about the new things that either were already introduced, the new enhancements, let's call them, that they were already either already introduced or they will be in the future? And I have at least a couple of them I can think about now. Like for example, the virtual threads. I think this is a topic that definitely may impact the performance of a running Java application. And I'm also thinking about the new value and primitive classes, which are not already there, but we are promised to have them somewhere in one of the next JDKs. So what do you think about these efforts? And which other efforts do you appreciate in the development of the JDK that might have an impact, a good impact on the running Java application?
Okay, yes. I think virtual threads is very nice addition to the JVM. If you remember, we had green threads initially, because back then in I think versions 1.1, the hardware back then was very poor, and therefore they did this green threads mechanisms that, for example, multiple threads can share the same OS thread. Now it's the same idea, but the thing is now you have to use virtual threads in some specific use cases. I don't recommend using virtual threads in all of these use cases. A very good anti-pattern is if you have CPU bound processing. Virtual threads doesn't help you at all if you have just in memory processing.
Like
There
the
is
the garbage collector, no, for example, the garbage collector only works on the memory itself. So probably for it doesn't make sense to be a virtual thread.
I'm referring, for example, if you have a thread pool, yeah, and that thread pool actually spawns some threads, do some in-memory computation, and then, for example, you join all the threads. This, if you switch it to a virtual thread pool, it's nonsense because this is not what a virtual thread is used for. Virtual thread, it's optimal in case you have blocking IO operations. So in such a case, for example, if you have a thread that you try to or you wait for some IO operation, virtual thread, it's very efficient. But for this kind of operation, it doesn't make sense. And what I think, because you asked me, I think this is a very good way, and it's probably a bit premature, but you know, we before worked with this reactive stuff. I think the virtual threads my enable on my make things easier, because working with reactive, it's not so easy, and maybe these virtual threads might enable the asynchronous APIs to be on the next level of usage, and yes, and
Cool.
and how we use this. So I see a very good point here. Also, structure concurrency. That's a good addition to the JVM. I don't have my experience with this value types that you mentioned.
Well,
I,
they are not there yet, no. So primitive and value types will be there, like who knows, in a year or two from now on. But I was
yes,
just curious if you
on
have a
this,
chance to.
on this, I cannot tell anything because I didn't do anything with them. But
Mhm.
with virtual threads and structure concurrency, I worked, and I think they have very good. There are very good use cases for virtual threads, yeah. Because you asked me what others. There are a lot of continuous improvements also on the performance of the on the runtime of the JDK. A lot of additions to extend the garbage collectors. Yeah, for example, in JDK 17, if I'm not wrong, there was this elastic metaspace addition. I think it was from SAP, a contribution. This is very nice in cases where you have a lot of class loading unloading, because the metaspace gets elastic. For example, the extension for this string deduplication, initially it was only for G1, GC. This is actually when you have a lot of strings. This helps you if you enable string deduplication, because you minimize the footprint, because some of the strings, is if they are backed by identical strings backed by the same, for example, byte array or char array, they can reduce the footprint by just pointing to the same one. This might work in some cases, might be not beneficial in other cases, but still it's a nice addition. Yeah. This is continuously in a very fast. I'm personally more excited about ZGC, if I have to be honest. Yeah.
Tell me more a bit about JZC, because I hear a lot of people being enthusiastic about that. And I'm not sure that everyone really knows about ZJC and why is it that popular now and how could it help our Java application?
Yes, so initially ZGC was non-generational collector, and it was actually a collector aimed to be used in low latency applications. I think the target was very low, 10 milliseconds or something, if I'm not wrong. And this is actually this could work independent of the heap size. I mean, if you have like few gig of heap, or for example 1 terabyte of heap. So this was a collector meant to provide your low latency, and most of the things were concurrent. Therefore, there is no the stop the word phases are very small, and most of the time it works concurrently with the application. This was actually the thing about it, yeah. And now they are moving into a generational ZGC. The thing is, if you have a non-generational GC and you have a lot of live sets objects. For example, you have a lot of strong references to your objects, and you also allocate the non-generational collector. It doesn't fits well. Yeah, it doesn't work well in some particular use cases, and this is one of them. And actually now that the generational ZGC is aimed to compensate some of the limitations of the non-generational one. But what I think is very nice, before, for example, if you had to tune a garbage collector which was generational, you maybe had to tune, for example, the tethering threshold. So this is the threshold which says when, for example, after how many GC cycles the object is promoted from young to old generation. You have, for example, to tune the young GC, the young heap size. All of these are gone with at least in the presentations that I saw from Oracle. It's very simple with generational ZGC as it is now on the tutorials. You just care about enabling the max heap size, and that's it. Everything else it's dynamically adjustable at runtime. And that's why I say, I in my opinion, this is the future. Yeah, this is what we need. We don't need to spend time tuning one garbage collector for one
Do I
use
always?
case, and
Yes.
then and yeah, and then for example make those tunings irrelevant for another use case, and then repeat the experiment. This is too much time. We need something which is dynamically adjustable, and I see this, that's why I said, for me this is very interesting.
Do I always need to tune my garbage collector? If I'm running a Java application as a developer, should I always consider uh, adjusting whatever I can adjust to make things performant, or can I always rely first on the defaults and then see if I have any trouble? I can go and make the necessary adjustments. What do you think?
Yeah, always do that. I mean, you can, for example, you can start with a default set of tunings, like for example, set XMX equal with XMX, enable pre-touch, because otherwise the pages, if they are not allocated. But not more than that. I would not recommend you to go even further. You can enable NUMA, for example, non-uniform memory access. Some of the GCs, for example, recommend also. I remember Shenandoah, even if it doesn't support NUMA, it recommends to enable NUMA, so it's just a JVM flag. So there are a very, very specific and limited set of parameters, but not more than that. I don't recommend to try anything unless we get back to what we initially discussed. You did some profiling and you understood that something is wrong. For example, one use case is you use GC and you have a lot of humongous allocations. Maybe you have to understand if you need to resize a bit the regions. Yeah, so you start with an additional flag. But I would never do it from the beginning. I would never do it because that you don't know what to do and you might have a contrary effect to make the things worse than than it should
You see,
than they
the
should be.
approach is you start with the defaults, you have observability in place, you continuously take a look on your observability metrics, and then you decide, hey, it's working fine, then I don't have to do anything, or I have this problem, what should I do about it? And
That's
then you
correct. Yeah,
cool, cool.
that's I recommend. Yes.
Do you
As
think that sorry, go on, Jons.
yes, and besides this, I already mentioned some low hanging fruits that you should pay attention when you write code. On this is on my to-do list, so I'll probably write a short blog post about these low-hanging fruits
That
when you
would be
write code.
excellent.
But I wouldn't go too much, yeah. So just do write it you normally write it in a cleaner way, and then just enable profiling and do how it behaves based on your SLAs, of course.
Do you think that developers take enough consideration about performance of their applications today?
I honestly think they don't have to in a lot of cases because today the you know that I see a trend, and today I think it's not like 10 years 15 years ago when okay, performance is something exotic, let's do it because it's nice. In my opinion, today it's more about quality of delivery and being agile, being responsive, and the capacity of reaction. What I mean with that is if I develop something, I need to be on a good quality and I have to be faster. I think this is the biggest concerns today. Most of the times, it's good to understand the production, how production behaves, but it's not in principle as a first thing about performance. Because today we have plenty of tools, like for example, Oracle Graal VM compiler. I didn't mention much things about this, but this is really wonderful. If you we will have this a lot of additions that we don't have to care too much about really overcomplicated code. I think today it's more about the quality of what we deliver. It's about security. Also, sometimes I worked in the banks a lot of years, and in the bank security, it's one of the topest because if security it's not good, nobody cares about performance. Yeah? If your for example account is compromised, would you care more because it was not, I mean, it responded in 800 milliseconds and not in 200 milliseconds? No, nobody cares about that. It cares about security. So from industry to industry, I think there are different concerns, but if I have to see like a common concern or a ground, it's more about the quality of what you deliver and the frequency of your delivery.
Haters will always say that Java is a slow language or language that delivers slow applications and is verbose. And we know a lot about what Java haters say. Do you think that Java is slow?
I never thought about that. I mean, I had some thoughts years ago when I did some LLVM versus GCC versus C2. LLVM and GCC, these are the Some compilers that you can use if you write C++ code, for example, and I saw really mind-blowing optimizations back in for example in LLVM, comparing to what we had back then in C2. Yeah. But today that is not a point of discussion anymore. Of course, yeah, you can write a bit more faster code if you go with C++, if you go with other languages. But the main problem is what I have said before. The speed of development, it's not the same. That the complexity of those tools is not the same. It's much more higher if you go with, for example, C++. Therefore, I think that's not a question for me. Yeah? The speed, it's today Java, it's fast enough to do whatever you want, of course, in most of the business industries with it.
Cool. We had already a chat for the last 40 minutes, and I think it's time to close it. Is it something that you want to tell or to our audience, something kind of that we've missed, or that the people should know about this subject or any other subject that is of interest for you?
No, I don't. Nothing comes to my mind, so I don't want to invent something on the spot now. No, I mean it really depends on everybody. If you are interested in about performance or not, you have plenty of resources, but I cannot. I mean, what I can recommend for the audience is always, if you like a subject, do some hands-on stuff, try it on your own, because and try to understand as much as you can from everything you do. If you write a piece of code, try it, test it, why it's behaving like that, why it's not behaving like that. Be curious and be have a high interest in everything you do. This is the only way how you can go further in life, and this is how I see it. This is what makes difference, yeah, across the sort of software developers. But I cannot tell you something more than
Cool.
that.
Yunus, thank you so much for this discussion, for being with us today. Thanks to our audience for leaving us the messages in the chat and for following us. We had plenty of people today. If, of course, I do recommend you follow Yunus on Twitter or X or whatever the name is now, and LinkedIn and other social media, and keep an eye on his blog, because as you have seen, he's writing a lot of very powerful and full of knowledge articles. Thank you again, Yunus, for accepting this invite and for everything that you taught us today.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure, and I don't realize how these 40 minutes went. It was very
A very good
interesting and
discussion. Yeah.
motivated discussion for me. Thank you so much. Thanks to the audience, and all the best.